So thank you very much for your attendance. So my name is Eric Clua. I will make that presentation also in the name of my co-author and co-worker, which is Frédéric Torrent. So actually I'm a marine biologist attached to the CRIOBE here in Moorea. And Frédéric was recently attached to the CRIOBE, but is now working to the Maison des Sciences de l'Homme here in Papeete. So we heard about Vincent speaking about attractivity and how could we attract more tourists to, let's say, French Polynesia, but also, let's say, to Oceania, I mean the Pacific in a general way. My presentation will be about advocacy, and advocacy about what? About how could we use culture in a very positive sense, of course, from a technical point of view, what we call segment, I mean add or find an added value of the product and make that a tourist who is saying, where should I go next winter? Let's go to the South Pacific instead of going to Europe or wherever else. So, where should I? C'est là? D'accord, okay, so you will forgive me because, as I told you, I'm a shark specialist. So actually what I'm going to present I think should be working for all kinds of animals, or let's say animal-based ecotourism in a very wide and large way. But as a shark specialist, it's much easier for me, as of course I prepared that presentation yesterday night, you know, to speak about what I know, which is sharks. So let me give you just a quick overview on shark-based ecotourism. And we know now that it's, as many other animal-based ecotourism, developing very quickly around the world. Looking at the sharks, we have almost 400 diving centers that are proposing, you know, shark watching around the world. And actually, the interesting stuff is to see that it's over 300 million US per year. That is the global value, you know, of shark tourism. And as you can see here, actually, Oceania is right after, you know, that continent, and so it's I would say in an interesting position. But that position could be, of course, improved. And the interesting point about shark tourism, at least this one, is that it should be twice, you know, in about less than 10 years now, you know, that should be increasing, you know. So it's just to say that, let's say, animal-based ecotourism is really developing now all around the world. So on what relies this ecotourism? On animals, as I said. So you have the birds. Here I've put the Polynesian names. You can have eels, you can have whales, you can have, of course, rays, turtles, and of course my preferred one, sharks. Okay. So actually an important point of my advocacy process is admitting that these species are very important, you know, for ecotourism. Now, what about the importance of these flagship species, you know, in the culture? So in Oceania, and let's say in French Polynesia, they are very important. Actually, the mentioned species, whatever, from birds to sharks, they can, in a cultural approach, they can represent a god, you know, in the ancient culture, and actually the Polynesian name for that is either Ara or Atua. These animals, they can be the messenger for God, so it's not exactly the same thing. And actually, the point I want to make is that things are at the same time very complicated, but very also, I would say, interesting for the people who just look at it. These animals, they can be the family protector. You heard about, and it's called the taura. And they can also, for example, be the support for ancient spirit, the vaka, that can help, you know, somebody from your family who is dead, you know, to join the, you know, the world for the dead people. So I need to be quick, you know, but I just want you to admit that these species are very important in the culture if you really look at it. And the point is that so far, I would say that, well, I would also say that if you want some detail about what I've just said, and it was just a teaser for you, we have that interesting article, I think, I hope, that was just published in Human Ecology, which is about actually, here you have the title of the article, but it's about why the Ana Atoll warriors were called Parata. Parata is the name of, the vernacular name of a shark. And they look like very nice people. We would have enjoyed, I mean, to meet. They were very fierce warriors. But anyway, so that is just, if you want to information about that, I would say, role of flagship species, you know, in the culture, that is one of the different sources. Okay, now, the important question, suggesting my presentation is what is so far the role, you know, of culture in ecotourism. So I'm not saying I'm speaking for whole Oceania, although I think that what is happening here in French Polynesia might be the same, you know, also in other Pacific countries. So the answer is very clear. I mean, so far it's almost nil. Actually, there was a study conducted quite recently, like 2 years ago, by Lagui. And it was about description, analysis of animal-based ecotourism here in French Polynesia. And she found out that less than 10% of the guides that are supposed to take people at sea to see birds, to see rays, whatever, less than 10% really use culture or give some cultural information about the animals. And it's quite surprising, I would say, somehow, to see that instead of speaking about, I would say, the asset on which is based the activity, which is to take people to see sharks, well, these guides, they will instead speak about the origin of the name of the bays, the shape, the name of the mountains. I mean, many things, sometimes, not always right, but many things, but nothing linked to the animals. So, part of my advocacy approach is also to, I would say, to speak about money. Unfortunately, in the present world, I'm not here to say that it's good or bad, but I would say that if you speak to decision makers, and including for tourism or whatever, or even animal conservation, I think it's very important nowadays to speak in an easy to understand way, and I mean to speak about money. Let's make it very simple. So how can we apply, you know, and that is again quite general, but how do we apply that economic approach to nature conservation? You all have heard about the ecosystem services. I mean, the principle that nature is here, you know, to give services. So linked to that ecosystem services approach, we have what we call the total economic value, which is an approach to be able actually to calculate the total economic value of an asset, a natural asset. And that asset can be everything. I mean, there was that article from Costanza, which was applied to nature in general, you know, in science in the late 90s. But you can apply that to anything. It can be a snail, it can be rays, it can be whatever, or trees. So I will just give you some details. The total economical value actually is composed of what we call use values and non-use values. So I won't describe everything, but again with that, let's say, economical approach, again applied to sharks, what can we say? So we can say that actually you have all the different value. Here you have the use value, the non-use value, and here in the direct use values, you have two kinds of values. One are called consumptive. So consumptive is very easy to understand. It's fishing, okay? You use the sharks. I mean, you fish them, so then you can use them. You can eat them, you can sell the teeth or whatever. So then you have indirect use value and other values. What is important for us, it's about two different values. First one is the direct use values, but non-consumptive, and that is about ecotourism. That is where we are, you know, within that very general economic approach, we are actually here with ecotourism. Non-consumptive, why? Because you are using sharks, but you are not fishing them, okay? You are just use them to make money because you will bring people from the rest of the world to see your sharks, okay? That is called, so, non-consumptive. Now, the other value which is interesting from my perspective, it's the non-use value, which is split in bequest value and cultural value. So about the non-consumptive direct value, just to show you the work that was done here in French Polynesia, we showed, for example, that one lemon shark here in Moorea could bring over 300,000 US per year, you know, to the local economy, or even through his life, like more than $2 million. So of course, we prove that a live shark brings more money than a dead one. Now, about non-use value, we have two different ones. As I said, the bequest value. Bequest value is about transmitting something to the next generation. Okay, you don't want shark to disappear because you want your grandchildren, you know, to have sharks also like you had. And the other one is called the existence or hedonist value. It's about just getting pleasure or being happy just by seeing sharks. Okay, so it's very difficult to put money behind that. We know there is an economical value. Now to transfer that to finance, it's a bit more difficult, but definitely there is an economic value on that. And what I'm suggesting is to use both culture and that economic value to speak to decision makers and improve, you know, the marketing of the natural assets here in French Polynesia and in the Pacific. And of course, these non-use values are paramount, very important, you know, in indigenous, autochthonous population and even more in Oceania. So how can we improve the cultural inputs? Actually, there was a work here done in French Polynesia. There was a book that was written by Frederick and myself 2 years ago under funding of the Ministry of Tourism. Unfortunately, the time it took for us to write the book, the minister changed, and you know how it works. You know, when a new minister comes, what was done before is never good, you know. So unfortunately, the product was delivered, but it's still waiting for printing, you know. Anyway, I'm here for advocate that work that was done, and of course in that book you will to get all the background about culture and the place of this flagship species. Here it's about, for example, a scheme about cosmogony, you know, in the Polynesian culture. But in a very pragmatic way, what we have at the end of that book is about 20 sheets about like that one, which is about, you know, a species, and give you some information about biology, but also about culture. And that is made for the guides. These guys who doesn't know what to tell the people, the tourists, you know, they should just tell that, and that will be fine enough, you know, to have a very interesting, we think, input, you know, in the product, in the ecotourism product. And of course, it's not only about sharks; it's also all the other species, like even corals or clams or whatever, you know. Now, let's imagine a perfect world. In the way that we have to use culture, but use it in a very wise way. In my title, if you remember well, there was the word sustainability, and you know how sustainability works. We need three things for sustainability. We need ecology, we need social, and we need economics. So if I was clear enough, you understood that. I hope I have demonstrated, you know, the economical output of ecotourism, of course, which is one part of the story. The other part is about the social dimension of ecotourism. In social dimension, we of course put culture, but also the fact that we want these guides to be, of course, Polynesian people from the country, providing that service, you know, to the tourist. But we also need something which is again about an economical approach, which is what we call the payment for ecosystem services. In other words, the nature is providing a service, and on the price, on the money which is made out of ecotourism, part of that money should be used, you know, to meet the objective of ecology. I mean, maintain the assets, I mean the animals. So some money should be inverted also in the conservation of these animals and make sure that we maintain all that working all together. That's why I speak about you know, a perfect world. And what is the take-home message? Good timing? Yes? Okay. You can read it. Okay, the take-home message, which is about making money based on beauty and natural assets through wise use of culture, but also reinvest parts of the, you know, the benefits in the conservation of natural assets. And I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Question for Ed?
No question. It was so clear.